This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. Yunxiao's sudden appearance stunned everyone for a long time. Such a solemn and sacred throne was actually sat on by such an inexplicable person, and it seemed that he was just relying on his unique movement technique and opportunism. All of a sudden, everyone was depressed and lamented that they had wasted a great opportunity. How good would it be if they could grasp it? In the blink of an eye, Li Yi went berserk. His body could not help but tremble. He was filled with new and old grudges and anger. The sword in his hand also trembled violently when it sensed his killing intent. Suddenly, a secret voice entered his ears, causing an extremely struggling expression to appear on his face. He finally suppressed the grief and indignation, but his eyes were still bloodshot as he stared at Yunxiao. After Yunxiao drank the tea in the cup, his eyes lit up. A wisp of red light came from above, as if washing his body. His skin turned ruddy, and a beam of light rushed out of his body. He had advanced directly. "You coward, pfft." Li Yi watched helplessly as he leveled up. He was stunned for a moment before he spat out a mouthful of blood in anger. The power of the 5-star Martial Supreme was instantly raised to 6 stars. Everyone present could feel it. They were jealous of this person's good life and his opportunism. At the same time, they were full of fantasies about the effects of the high-grade blood tea.
Ah!
"It's you, Li Yunxiao?" A person in the crowd cried out in alarm. His tone was as if he had seen a ghost, filled with extreme fear and panic. You, why did you come out?" The man felt a chill run down his spine, and his body trembled in his brocade robe, his face ashen. Yunxiao ignored the man. Instead, he raised his glass to Li Yi and said with a smile, "Thank you for opening the way for me, my friend. I didn't expect to have a feast with you after drinking in the palace of Tianshui. It's a pleasure to meet an old friend in a foreign land." The imperial palace of Tianshui? Everyone was confused. They had never heard of this place before. They frowned. This monkey was so familiar with the southern mountain range. Could it be another monkey? Li Yi was furious again. The palace of Tianshui was the turning point of his life, and now that it was mentioned, his face turned livid with anger. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, gritted his teeth, and said in a cold voice, "Old and new grudges, let's fight to the death in the arena." Yunxiao sipped his tea with a smile and asked in surprise, "Could it be that a good friend also wants to marry a beauty? Didn't you say that you don't love Hongzhuang and only love Lanyan?" Pfft. Li Yi's mind went blank, and a boundless sense of humiliation and hatred immediately surged up. His body's supreme aura exploded, and the purple band that bound his hair instantly burst open. His hair was all straightened and scattered behind him, as if he was possessed. His eyes were blood-red as he roared, "Wow! I'll kill you. I'm going to kill you." Outside the Wind and Moon building, Ning Hengfeng was also looking into the building quietly at Yunxiao. The originally dull and boring matter had stirred up his interest with the arrival of this young man. Suddenly, he frowned and looked up into the void not far away. "Aya, what should we do if the military governor finds out?" "Wait." Lil 8 suddenly called out and waved at Ning Hengfeng, smiling and welcoming him. The tyrannical sky tiger smiled bitterly. If Ning Hengfeng didn't notice this kind of long-distance casting and such a strong elemental energy fluctuation, how could he be qualified to be the commander of the Imperial Guards of the Red Moon City? But don't worry, as long as we don't attack the younger generation, Ning Hengfeng won't care. God knows how many old monsters are watching this great ensemble. Yes. As little Mina responded, he turned to the person who was casting the spell beside him and said, "Sister Li, can't you be more subtle? We're world-famous assassins. It's a disgrace to be with you and expose our position. If I didn't use a powerful mind-calming spell to directly shock Li Yi's mind, I'm afraid he would have already exploded and wanted to kill Li Yunxiao," Li said with an indifferent expression. "You should know the consequences." "Aya, then I have no choice. This kid is no match for that kid." Number 8 shook his head helplessly. The tyrannical sky tiger's expression turned serious as it said in a deep voice that Li Yunxiao is by no means an ordinary person. In my opinion, he should be eliminated as soon as possible. I'm just afraid that Chief will play with fire this time. If we let this person grow up, he'll be too terrifying. He's not even 20 years old yet. Smart children tend to become stupid when they grow up, said number 8 with a smile. This kid is still far from being a threat to the chief. With such arrogance, it's a question whether he can grow up. The tyrannical sky tiger sighed inwardly. Although Lil 8's strength was extraordinary, his vision was still a little inferior to his. When this matter was over, he had to personally speak to the chief about eliminating Yun Xiao, and from then on, he would retire from the spirit mountains and great rivers, cultivate in peace, and spend the rest of his life there. A cold glint shot out of Li's eyes. He wanted to say something but stopped himself. In the end, his expression returned to calmness. No one knew Yun Xiao's horror better than the few demons. Since these assassins wanted to kill him, she was naturally happy to see it, but she did not have any illusions about the result. She could not be bothered to listen to the two's chit-chat anymore. Instead, she focused all her attention on casting a calming spell so that Li Yi, who was far away, would not go berserk. In the Wind and Moon Pavilion, Ruan Zimao, who was sitting on the throne, was surprised by Li Yi's madness, but what was even more surprising was that the person who was trembling in fear after Yun Xiao appeared was his younger brother. Xiling, you know this person? The one who was trembling with fear was none other than Ruan Xiling. Yun Xiao had actually appeared here, but he had not received any news from Go Xingguang, so the result was obvious. However, he could not figure out how he had failed. Putting aside the fact that Go Xingguang and the other two were martial supreme powerhouses, the Taihua Gold Talisman Sealing Formation was one of the best killing formations in the world. How could he have escaped? Ruan Xiling calmed himself down a little and said, "Big brother, this man is Li Yunxiao, the city lord of Yanwu in the southern region. He killed brother Cheng Yong in a restaurant earlier. Now that things had come to this, it was useless for him to be afraid. This was the Red Moon City. No matter how big the matter was, he would at most be punished by his elders. What he needed to do now was to make up for the situation. Moreover, the situation at the Bridge of Rainbows might not be as bad as he had imagined. Perhaps this kid had used some secret technique to escape." What? As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. He actually killed Cheng Yong, one of the 5 heroes of the western region? This person was indeed from the southern mountain range. Everyone's faces became extremely shocked. When did the southern mountain range become so powerful? 2 random juniors appeared. One killed one of the 5 heroes and the other killed one of the 7 stars. Was this a completely heaven-defying rhythm? You killed Chang Yong? Chang Haomiao's face sank and his eyes became cold as he asked. Yun Xiao smiled faintly as he picked up the teapot in front of him and drank from it. There are too many fools in the world, and I have to kill a few every day. I really don't remember who this Cheng Yong you mentioned is, and what does he look like? Give me some hints and see if I can remember. How arrogant, how bold. Chang Haobo licked his lips and laughed evilly. I can feel that your soul is surging. I like it very much. But I'm not interested in you, Yun Xiao said. You're a young man with a bright future. Don't follow in the footsteps of those jokers. His words stunned everyone and made them feel extremely strange. Chang Haomiao was obviously older than him. Chang Haomiao burst into laughter. His voice was so penetrating that it echoed in everyone's hearts. However, he did not smile when he laughed. Instead, his face grew colder and colder as he laughed, and the killing intent in his eyes sentenced Yun Xiao to death. Yun Xiao sighed in his heart. People always had to grow up in self-righteousness and gradually become humble. Li Yi, who had been growling and struggling at the side, finally calmed down with Li's help. He was drenched in sweat and panting. He moved his eyes away from Yun Xiao and looked at the fight in the distance, lest he suffer. At this moment, a person had won in the distance. It was one of the 5 heroes, Lu Yuxing. He directly sat on the throne, and with great joy, he picked up the tea and drank it in one gulp. One of the 7 seats was left, and the remaining 2 were in a fierce battle. Li Yi swept his gaze over them, snorted coldly, and headed for the last seat. Everyone was shocked, thinking that the 2 men were in trouble. Their eyes shifted from Yunxiao to Li Yi. As expected, the 2 people who were in the middle of the battle immediately became alert. They both stopped and blocked Li Yi's path in front of the throne. They were 2 of the 7 stars of the eastern region, Shi Guanyu and Wang Lisin. The previous example of Li Yi trampling Westgate Jinling to death had left the 2 of them extremely fearful. Although Westgate Jinling was ranked last among the 7 stars, it was not a piece of trash that could be easily trampled to death. Moreover, Li Yi's killing intent was so intense that it was almost frozen, forcing them to turn pale. Li Yi's expression was cold. So, it's from the eggs of the eastern 7 apertures. Are you going to move aside on your own, or will you move aside after the peacock spreads its tail? He said coldly. His voice was emotionless, causing the 2 of them to shiver. However, they could feel the surging killing intent hidden beneath the cold voice, which was about to erupt at any moment. Shi Guanyu's face was cold as he gritted his teeth. To be able to experience the skills of the southern region's powerhouses, this trip has not been in vain. Then I'll have to see for myself, Li Yi said without hesitation. With a clatter, the exquisitely decorated sword was finally pulled out and slashed down. A bone-chilling cold immediately filled the entire building, and everyone could not help but shiver. Biming Lifeng's expression changed drastically, and his pupils constricted. Cloud-piercing sword. A sword that shakes the heavens. He slashed out twice in an instant. The sword chi that was like an ocean wave immediately locked onto Shi Guanyu and the other person, slashing down with an aura that could split everything. Before the sword chi arrived, the cold air had already broken into their bodies, freezing their meridians and blood. They had almost lost the power to resist. Their eyes were filled with horror. Only now did they realize how wrong they were. The difference in strength between them was like the difference between heaven and earth. They were not qualified to fight at all. However, it was too late. He could only watch helplessly as the 2 fatal swords slashed down. Li Yi's frosty sword aura suddenly froze in midair, and an invisible force actually suppressed his sword gleam. Ruan Zimao had appeared in front of Shi Guanyu and Wang Lisin. His eyes were cold and he said softly, "This is a grand event, and no bloodshed is allowed." Li Yi's eyes were filled with killing intent as he stared at Ruan Zimao for a moment. He then put away his sword in shock and returned to his normal state of mind. "Then I'll give you some face and spare these 2 cowards. If I meet them in the arena, they better surrender." Shi Guanyu and Wang Lisin trembled in anger, but what could they do when they were not as good as the other? If he didn't know what was good for him and rushed forward in a moment of impulse, he could only court death. Ruan Zimao might not save him a second time. Ruan Zimao glared at Li Yi coldly before turning to the 2 of them. "Winning and losing is a very normal thing. The 2 of you don't need to take it to heart." The 2 of them looked at Ruan Zimao gratefully. After thanking him, they didn't say anything more and retreated into the crowd. The corner of Ruan Zimao's lips curled up imperceptibly. Although he could not stand Li Yi's arrogance, he had picked up a ready-made bargain. He had done these 2 a favor, and the 7-star son of the eastern region would undoubtedly be a future powerhouse of the eastern region. This favor was not small. All of a sudden, a furious roar resounded through the air. It was Li Yi's frenzied voice. Ruan Zimao was shocked for a moment and felt that something was amiss. He quickly turned his head to look. Li Yi was trembling with anger as he pointed a finger at Yunxiao and roared, You shameless animal. You actually drank my blood tea." Ruan Zimao was stunned for a moment. He looked at the table and saw that the 2 teacups in front of Yunxiao had finished the first few dishes. The tea leaves were swollen and the color had turned into an ordinary color. Embarrassed, Yunxiao sent the teacup in front of him to Li Yi with his elemental energy and said with an embarrassed smile, "This thing is too good to drink. It can relax the tendons and bones, remold the hair and wash the marrow. After drinking it, even the vital qi has a steady increase. I saw another cup on the table and couldn't help but drink it." It's just a cup of tea, it's nothing to the Red Moon City. Li Yi's face turned green, and with a single palm strike, the teacup was instantly reduced to dust. He then turned his head to look at Ruan Zimo. Ruan Zimo was secretly amused, but he was also very surprised. This person was extremely powerful and extremely arrogant. Why was he so afraid of a 6-star Marshal Supreme? He didn't even dare to make a move after being bullied time and time again. He was not the only one. Everyone present was extremely puzzled. However, the title of the city Lord of Yanwu was enough to attract the attention of the world. Besides, with the sudden appearance of these two freaks in the southern region, was it a sign of their rise? In fact, the so-called major forces on the continent were essentially the major spirit veins, and where the spirit veins gathered was where talents gathered. Now, Yanwu had greatly fulfilled this condition and had become a popular city in the eyes of the world. Ruan Zimao coughed and said, "This high-grade blood tea is an extraordinary item. The Red Moon City really can't take out anymore. I'll get someone to change it to a medium-grade tea for this young master Li Yi." Li Yi was light-headed from anger. He knew that the difference between middle grade and high grade was like the difference between cloud and mud. Putting everything else aside, mid-grade blood tea could be bought from all the major chambers of commerce, but this high grade was not even on sale. It could only be seen in some super auctions. If it were not for Li's incantation of calmness that had been lingering in his mind, he would have burst into a rage on the spot and fought Yunxiao to the death. His current strength and status were all thanks to the leader of the demon race and the Death God Palace. Both sides had forbidden him from having a conflict with Yunxiao at this moment, so he did not dare to disobey. Soon, a servant brewed a cup of medium-grade blood tea and brought it over. "Drink it, drink it." Yunxiao smiled apologetically. "Calm down. You'll get heaty easily, so drink more tea." Everyone looked at Li Yi's twisted face and could not help but laugh in their hearts. Their expressions relaxed and they felt indescribable comfort. Li Yi stared at the cup of intermediate-grade tea and snorted in anger. He slammed his palm down again, and the cup and tea were turned into nothingness. Ruan Zimao laughed coldly in his heart, but he pretended not to see it. The 7 seats of honor are all gathered here. However, the world is vast and there are endless geniuses. Some of the people in these 7 seats have surprised me. Everyone fell silent. Out of the 7 territories, the southern region actually occupied 2. This was simply unbelievable. Could it be that everything they had heard about the southern region was wrong? It was hard to imagine that a place that was rumored to not even have a martial honor could cultivate such a young marshal supreme and martial honor. Their perception of the southern region would probably change from now on, and even the southern region would begin to enter the eyes of the major forces. There was only one person from the eastern region among the 7, and he was the local master. The eastern region also occupied the home ground advantage, but no guest took a seat, which made the young people of the eastern region feel ashamed. "Well, life is always so unexpected," Yunxiao said with a smile. "It's just like that." Ruan Zimao looked at him with deep meaning before saying, "Although this Qingming Bright Moon Hotel is a building, it's actually an extremely ingenious profound-level weapon." With a thought, he made a hand seal with one hand. The entire dark and narrow buildings suddenly began to change. The surrounding scenery kept on spinning, like a flower bud gradually opening. Rays of sunlight shone in from the outside, like vines winding around the building. The sky scenery appeared one by one. The entire Wind and Moon Hotel was originally designed as a pair of twins, floating in the sky. At this moment, with the dragon-like bridge in the middle as the center, the buildings began to break down and assemble, gradually forming a garden in the sky. Hundreds of flowers bloomed in the surroundings, and there were also mountain rocks and trees that were created by God's work. They grew one by one, looking beautiful. A ray of sunset glow rose from the horizon, crossing the boundless sky and landing on the garden. A bright moon began to slowly rise into the sky, illuminating the garden in the sky. The entire world seemed to become a scene of its own, forcibly embedded in the Red Moon City. Everyone was shocked speechless by the beautiful scene in front of them. They could only look at the garden floating in the clouds with the bright moon hanging high in the sky. There was even the sound of a mountain spring flowing in the garden. Tens of thousands of meters away from the garden in the sky, there was a clear sky. Before I came here, I heard from the elders of my family that the wind and moon building is a wonder of the world, but isn't this a little too shocking? Baiming Lifeng said with a wry smile. Can this thing really be made by human hands? Ruan Zimao also sighed. Although the wind and moon building is not very useful, it is more precious than a 9th-tier mystic weapon. Only those extremely bored alchemists would have the time to do so. Everyone was deeply moved. Cultivators were all extremely pragmatic existences. With the cultivation method to refine such a wondrous scene, how many 9th-tier profound armaments could they refine? You've enjoyed the fruits of others' labor, and now you're calling them boring? Yunxiao glared at them. Since you all think it's not worth it, he said, pointing his middle finger at them, then we'll move down and find a small tavern to make do with it. Brother Yunxiao, you seem to be very protective of alchemists, Baiming Lifeng said with a smile. Are you also an alchemist? Yunxiao gave him a look and said indifferently, don't call me your brother. I don't have a good impression of the people from Baiming Dark Palace. As for the Tao of sorcery, I've learned a little. Everyone was stunned. Their eyes were all focused on him, feeling very puzzled. Even if there was enmity between them, there was no need to say it so directly. It was necessary to be friendly on the surface. Could it be that the people of the southern mountain range had improved in strength, but their intelligence had not caught up? Baiming Lifeng was also stunned for a moment, but then he sneered, may I know what kind of grudge Baiming Dark Palace has with your city lord? I don't think they've ever come into contact with each other before. Not yet, but there will be in the future, Yunxiao said. So, let's not get too close. Everyone was speechless. Wasn't this clearly a deliberate attempt to attract hatred? Moreover, his target was Baiming Dark Palace, one of the 7 superpowers. He had also offended Cheng Haomiao of the Soul Devourer race earlier. It seemed like he was seeking his own death. Baiming Lifeng was also at a loss for words. There was actually such a person. His mind went blank for a moment, and he didn't know how to deal with this. You have character. I wonder if your strength is as strong as your temper. The blood in my body is starting to burn. I really want to see how strong your soul is now. Chang Haomiao laughed hideously. He even licked his lips after he finished speaking, making people shudder. Ruan Zimao's brows were also tightly furrowed. The appearance of these 2 people from the southern mountain range was a big surprise to him. Originally, he had full confidence in the group arena and everything was under his control. Now, the only slip-up was these 2 people in front of him. Zhu Xuanqi raised his head and looked at the sky, full of suspicion. Brother Zimao, isn't this bright moon fake? But why is it still able to emit such a powerful moonlight force, no different from a real moon? When he asked this, everyone also felt that it was strange. Ruan Zimao gathered his thoughts and smiled. Although this moon is man-made, it's a moon GUI with precise calculations. It absorbs the power of the moon through the formation in this garden. The exquisiteness of this is indeed unbelievable. One of the most important uses of this moon GUI is to calculate the crimson moon. Calculating the crimson moon? Everyone was confused, and a few people looked surprised and dazed. Yunxiao's pupils constricted as if he had thought of something. He raised his head and looked at the bright moon, his eyes filled with deep thought. Ruan Zimao said, this is the origin of the name Red Moon City. Although the bright moon in the sky is of a normal color all year round, at a certain time, the heavenly Martial continent can only see a blood-red moon when looking up at the sky from the Red Moon City. This is the origin of the name of the Red Moon City. The crimson moon is like blood? How could there be such a strange thing? Lu Yuxing was shocked. There's only one bright moon, but there's always a moon that changes color. I've never heard of a moon that can change color. It should be the same no matter which part of the continent you look at. Ruan Zimao chuckled. That's true, Brother Yuxing. However, there's an exception at a certain time. That time is the opening of the celestial realm of the eastern region, the end of time.